This was not your typical injured workers case, to be sure. When I got the case, I received the regular information from the client, like his name, his DOB, date of birth, last known address, phone number, physical address histories, and I was also told by the client we have no idea where he is living. He says he is homeless and he is on the streets. No problem. That's what I tell the client. Let me see what I can dig up on him. Then the fun begins. I ran a comp report on him on all of my databases. I always have several investigative databases in my arsenal to make sure that I can get as much information on my subject as possible. You see, folks, not all databases are created equal. Now, they all have a lot of great information in them, to be sure, but that information comes from differing sources per database company and the type of information that they are providing. As well, the freshness of the data varies depending on when they get that data and when they get it put into their database. Now, I got all of my comp reports together and I started reading through them with my trusty big cheap tablet, my number 2 pencil handy to take notes. Now, the great thing about comp reports is they provide a lot of information. And the bad thing about comp reports, they provide a lot of information. I definitely had my work cut out for me on this one. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. There were over 50 residences listed and probably that many vehicles as well. I noticed every database listed the last known address as, well, his last known good address for him. But I knew he didn't live there from the intel the client had. So I could quickly discard most of those addresses, at least from the standpoint of looking for him at one of them initially. I did, however, make note of his relatives and known associates in the same town and their addresses, just in case. I also had a hit on an old social media site where I was able to get an old photo from him from about 10 or 15 years prior. Not much to go on, but I did have something there. One thing I did note from that photo was his hat. He had a very unique hat on and he had very long hair. As I discovered later, this was very good intel to have, to be sure. I then called all of the homeless shelters in the area and I asked if they knew of him by name. I did get some information from one of the shelters that led me to believe he may be on the streets, but was recently talking about a specific place that he was hoping that he would be able to get some temporary housing at. Now, this location that he was talking about actually provides housing for homeless people who qualify within their guidelines. The men usually bunk 4 to a room. They get breakfast and dinner and access to showers and bathrooms, but the men must leave every morning by 7 a.m. and they cannot return until 7 p.m. Now, when I called them, they would not provide me any information as to whether he was staying there or not, and rightfully so. They aren't really supposed to be divulging any of that information, but they didn't say no, so I took that as reason enough for me to suspect that he may be staying there. I reached out to my client and I let them know that I had a possible lead and I would be doing some recon surveillance in the morning. They were fine with the plans, and I got prepared for my surveillance. I got all of my gear prepared that night and I loaded up my surveillance vehicle and I am ready to go. I get up nice and early. I head out about 6 o'clock in the morning and I get set up. Now, this location is in a very open industrial type of setting. There are huge businesses, huge parking lots all over the place. You would think this would be an easy place to find a good setup point. But at 6 o'clock in the morning, guess what's going on? Yep, everybody is showing up for work at all of those places. So it took me a bit to find a good place where I could see up the road at the homeless shelter and have some level of security that I was not going to be bothering anybody that was showing up for work. And I had somewhat of a quick access out to the main road to conduct a follow when he left. Now, I sat there and I watched car after car after car pull out of that homeless shelter and drive past me. And you know what? It seems that most of those homeless guys have long hair and some type of a hat on. Go figure. I must have chased down 10 cars that morning only to be disappointed when I noticed that nobody in the car was my subject. Then, just a few minutes after 7 that morning, I saw him. There he was, walking out of the front door. I knew it was him. Long hair, same hat, or at least the same style hat, and walking along as if he had no cares in the world. When I say long hair, I mean long hair. It was down to his knees. That was nice. He was going to be easy to pick out in a crowd. I grabbed my camera. Now I'm getting some good video, and man, am I ever excited. I love it when a plan comes together. I'm shooting video as he's walking out to the street. Then he walks about 3 blocks directly towards me, and then he stops at a bus stop. Now, if you have ever had to follow a subject on a bus, you know the challenges involved. It is not fun indeed. I had to make a decision and I had to make one quick. Do I go on foot and do I get on the bus with him or do I follow in my car? Then suddenly I see the bus coming and I see him waving to the bus. But wait, he's waving the bus on. He's not waving for the bus to slow down. I am so glad it happened so quickly. That would have been tough had I gotten to that bus stop and not gotten onto that bus. It would have probably looked pretty suspicious. I just sat there in my car getting tons of video. Then I see another man approaching my subject. As he gets close to the bus stop, my subject gets up and they start walking right in my direction. Now, I am in a large parking lot with a lot of other vehicles, but I'm parked right up by the sidewalk that they are walking on. Now, I keep getting video out my side window as he keeps getting closer and closer. As he gets close enough, I stop getting video with my regular camera and I quickly grab my covert camera. I put it up on the dash so it is getting video as they walk by, and then I resume getting video out my other side window as they walk away. Next, I play leapfrog in the parking lots, getting video where I can as they both walk toward the downtown area. As they approach the downtown area, Yep, I lose visual contact with them. That's right. I know it sounds crazy. How do you lose somebody walking? But I did. In fact, folks, it can be very difficult to follow somebody when they're on foot when you're in a car. You find yourself driving past them, going around the block a lot, trying to relocate, trying to reestablish video positions. It can be very difficult indeed. I did an area canvas looking and looking and looking for him to no avail. I had to pull off with less than 3 hours on the job that day. I was not happy with myself, to say the least. I reached out to my client, gave them the good news, gave them the bad news. I found him and I lost him. Then I asked for a second investigator to help me follow, and they approved it. I went out a few days later with a second investigator. We set up where one of us watched the homeless shelter and the other one was in a parking lot further away. We did the same leapfrog technique, but with 2 vehicles. It was a whole lot easier. Then when the subject was a few blocks away from the downtown area, I went on foot surveillance. I had dressed down that day so I would kind of fit in. There were a lot of homeless people around in that area, so I was a little nervous. I was more afraid that they might notice that I was following him. I had my trusty covert camera with me and would get video from a street corner as he walked down the street. Then the other PI could get a good location down a block or so, and then I could relocate. Kind of the same leapfrog technique, but one on foot and one in a car. This worked very well indeed. I followed him to a convenience store where he bought some smokes. Then he hung out with a bunch of other homeless people. After a while, he left there. Then he went to another corner and he hung out with more homeless people. This was a bit nerve-wracking for me as I was that lone guy hanging out by myself down the street. Usually when the other PI got a good visual on him, I could then move into a different area and wait for him to go mobile again. I had also grabbed a light jacket, a second t-shirt, a ball cap, and my sunglasses, so at times I could change my appearance just a little bit. I try to never get too close to anybody that they would see my face. We followed him to a nearby church, along with a bunch of other folks there. They all went in, they got a good hot meal. I decided to not go in and try to gain video in there as I would probably surely get burned. I can play the part of a homeless guy from a distance, but probably not that well close up. Then he went to a park and just hung out for most of the morning. Then to a soup kitchen for lunch, then to another park. Then the cops roll up. Yep, the police came to the park and they got all of the homeless guys moving along. Now I was following him and then one of the patrol cars stopped to talk to me, the new kid on the block, you know. And after talking with them for just a few minutes, I realized I had lost visual of my subject. Now, we ended up working that case a lot over that summer. Once we got a good idea of all the places that he might go, we were able to do it with a fair amount of ease. The biggest lesson I learned on this case, folks, was discovering all of the shelters, the food kitchens, and the hangouts where the homeless people go. I learned a little bit about a world I didn't know a lot about at that time. And you know what else? I've worked a lot of homeless cases since then, and that education has come into play many times.